Jayhawk fans, what is going on? It has been an insane week for KU basketball. So much to get into, and it starts with Spring Bill. He does it again, landing the big fish of the sea, Hunter Dickinson. And we are here to talk all of that and all of the other moves that have happened this week. Hey guys, this is Keegan Russell. I got JB with me on the show today. You are listening to the KC Sports Authority podcast. As a reminder, you can find our podcast over on YouTube at KCSA Pod. Hit that subscribe button, share with your friends. Be sure to leave your comments below after each video to just let us know how you think of our content and how it's going for you. You can find us over on Facebook and Twitter. Again, search at KCSA Pod. Give us a like and a follow on there as well. Help us grow. Again, we're having a ton of fun doing this. And again, we're almost a year into this, and the sky's the limit for what we want to accomplish. So the more support you guys give to us, the more fun we can have and the more content we can bring you. Well, let's get into it, JB. It has been a monster week for Bill Self.
It's been huge. Absolutely huge.
This has got to be the next to, and we'll get into this, but next to some of the big recruiting moments in the last 20 years, this week alone has to be Bill Self's greatest week as a recruiter in his time at Kansas.
It's very possible. I mean, you think about the just the names of great KU basketball history and or big recruiting moments, and it's like, I think back to the excitement around Andrew Wiggins. We were thinking instant national title just off of his name alone. Of course, that didn't happen. Sad. But, Josh Jackson was huge. We had just lost Wayne Selden, and we needed somebody to fill that role, and he was the perfect piece. Xavier Henry as well. The big names in the past. Hunter Dickinson is right up there with him. The best thing about it, though, is Hunter is a proven talent in college basketball. He's been there, done that. He's been averaging big numbers for 3 straight years already. So I can't express enough how big of a signing this is.
We've been waiting for this news for a week and a half now. Obviously, he visits last week. Everyone assumes the visit went well, which why would it not? He still had a couple of visits lined up after. We got a little bit of him talking earlier in the week about what he might do, and it actually sounded like he had his decision made for a couple of days. He just wanted to set it up a proper way. But this has definitely got to be the biggest hype we've seen for a recruit, next to maybe Andrew Wiggins. I was thinking about that earlier too. I think Andrew Wiggins probably is the most hyped freshman recruit to ever come into the game, just because at that time he was considered the next LeBron, the biggest recruit since LeBron. And whether you agree or not that he lived up to that height at that time, the time he signed with KU, it was the biggest recruit signing we have ever had. I do think back to like Xavier Henry, that was really big at the time because that was really the first monster freshman recruit KU had really gotten, because at that point college recruiting was not the monster that it is today. Not that there weren't 5-star talents all around, but just the overall talent level the last 10 years has just tremendously increased. So these guys are just insane. But Bill Self does it again. He goes out and gets the number 1 ranked, probably the highest ranked transfer portal recruit of all time in Hunter Dickinson, the former Michigan Wolverine. And like you said, he's a proven commodity. He's done it at the college level for a couple of years now. Instant 20 and 10 a night kind of guy. And if you remember back to the press conference Bill Self had a couple weeks ago after the season, misses the Arkansas game with the health, of course. And that was the first time he was able to speak to the media. He basically said, watch out, guys, I'm coming. We're going to do things different.
Yeah.
I'm going to live in the portal.
I'm going to live in the portal.
And we're going to do some insane things. So Bill Self does it again. He goes after Hunter Dickinson, lands him going up against Kentucky, Villanova, Maryland. I want to know from you, was there ever any doubt or worry that Dickinson was going to go somewhere else?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny you asked that. I was going to say the same thing. Like, was there ever any doubt? There's always doubt. Always doubt. The I I've seen enough in my time being a KU fan of being excited for certain recruits and certain transfers to come here because I think it'll be a perfect fit, and it just doesn't happen. Um, I I was worried, I think, the most about Kentucky because I really felt like, okay, if Oscar Tshiebwe's gone, now there's still talk about him coming back, which it's a 50-50 shot. I mean, he's going to make money either way, whether it's NIL or in the NBA. He really could go anyway. But Kentucky, I was definitely worried about. I wasn't too worried about Maryland or Georgetown because really I understand the appeal of going back home, but we knew his goals. We knew his goals were to increase his draft stock, be center stage, be in a really, really big program. What program is bigger than Kansas?
Exactly.
And so it's like these things are coming into play, and we're thinking, okay, it just makes so much sense, and it did, it does, and it will make sense all day. But nothing's guaranteed in college basketball. Um, Even the national championship that we all think is coming because of him being here is not guaranteed. So there's always a little bit of doubt. Um, you know, Kentucky, I mean, the main reason they scared me was because some people seem to think that Kentucky is really good at producing NBA talent. They have an argument, but you know what I might say to that is those guys are already NBA talents before they come to Kentucky.
Yeah.
Bill Self is the guy who develops.
Mm.
So really, I think it was the perfect storm of everything he wanted. He did say Kansas checked all the boxes, which we knew. So I'm just so happy to have him.
Yeah, the wait was definitely well worth it. I think earlier in the week we were going back and forth on, all right, when's he going to announce? Why is it taking so long? There was a brief thought of mine that maybe his heart said he wanted to go back home to Maryland, but his head said there's no better decision than going to Kansas. You're going to have the biggest stage in America. You're going to
Yep.
be televised the most. You're going to be put into a system with a coach who covets exactly the type of player that Dickinson is, who's going to do everything possible to make him the focal point of the offense, get him a billion touches a night. And Bill Self, even though he doesn't kick out the one and done 5-star lottery picks every single season, he develops his guys.
Yeah.
And he takes them, he finds their raw talent, turns them into something bigger, and gives them every opportunity possible to grow into that role they need to be to get to the next level. And even though we don't kick out as many guys as the Kentuckys of the world, Bill Self is second to none when it comes to coaching and development. I think it was a no-brainer from the second Dickinson put his name in the portal. When most every major sports columnist out there is saying, wow, Dickinson's in the portal, this has Kansas written all over it, doesn't it? It just made perfect sense from the start. We've been joking on several episodes the last few months about how frustrating recruiting can be because KU seems to never get that 7-foot stud. And I'm talking like
Yeah.
legit stud from the start. Yes, we've had Azubuike. He was not a stud coming into college. He was pretty well ranked, highly recruited, but he was very raw and had a lot of development. Now he was a stud his senior
Yeah.
year, but even
Oh,
Azubuike is not the level that Hunter Dickinson is. When you're a walking double-double, can score from anywhere on the court, a little bit more mobile than Azubuike. Azubuike's probably, hands down better defender and all that, but the amount of offensive skill set Hunter Dickinson had is way better than Azubuike. And finally, Bill Self gets his guy. We've gone years where Joel Embiid may be the next closest, but again, and when Embiid came out, he was a very, very quick rising prospect at the end of recruiting. And of course, it took a few weeks to really get going, and he developed into something good. But KU's never really gotten the top dog kind of guy. David
yeah.
McCormack took him until his senior year to finally do that. And for the first time, Bill Self gets the top dog in this regard. Yes, he's had other top recruits, your Josh Jacksons, Andrew Wiggins, Xavier Henrys, but a guy like this is just top notch. It is the perfect fit. KU fans are going to just be drooling at the mouth to watch this team next year because DeJuan's going to be feeding Dickinson 100 times a night. They're just going to jump it down to him. He's going to turn, go up and score, or he's going to kick over and hit Timberlake in the 3. And not to put a pause on this, but those of you watching on YouTube, we didn't think this was going to happen, but Spencer is now ready to jump on with us. So I'm going to bring him on real quick. While that's loading, JB, let's talk about just the fit Hunter Dickinson's going to have in this offense. How do you think that's going to look for him?
It's funny. It's he's coming into a system that is just going to be built for him. And the best part about it is it's not like some guys coming in to play a role. He is coming in, if any role that he has, it's going to be the guy. He's going to be the guy.
My apologies, guys. That is my dog barking in the background.
But he's the thing I see the most is just, I mean, we talk about all the lobs that DeJuan can throw to him. We talk about all the pick and roll action that he could have, and just dominating and pulling down every board and contesting as many shots as he can. I was thinking, my gosh, when he comes in, I wonder if Bill Self is just going to show him a whole bunch of footage of Jeff Withey blocking shots, just to kind of like he did with Joel, because if there's anything that we can maybe improve on, gosh, I'd hate to say that, but yeah, maybe get a little bit better defensively. But he's a beast, and the offense is really going to run through him. We are going to look a lot different next year, but I think the scheme is definitely going to be around him. We are going from a team that's for the most part centered around Jalen Wilson getting him the ball, and Grady Dick and getting him the ball and getting a win, and it's shifting all to Hunter. Less pressure on every single guy on the roster. Hate to say it, but Hunter does have a lot of pressure to produce, but I don't have any doubt that he can.
Well, guys, we now have Spencer with us. He has found a way to make it into the podcast. Spencer, what's up, man? Glad to have you on here.
How's it going? I almost joined on my boss's Zoom account, so I had to switch right there. He's not a big KU basketball guy, so I don't know if he would want through the notion that he was on a podcast on Friday night. I don't know.
Talking
Steve, if
KU
you do
hoops.
listen to this, hop on sometime.
We can get another sports perspective for sure. Well, Spencer, we were just talking about Hunter Dickinson, of course, the monster commitment this week, and obviously there's more we're going to talk about with the portal and some other news going on, but just give us your initial thoughts on what it means to land Hunter, what that does for KU basketball moving forward, and maybe what kind of change this might have in fans' terms of how we view the transfer portal and recruiting moving forward.
Yeah, well, I think it does a couple things. And the first thing that I would compare it to, I think this is what Andrew Wiggins committing here in 2014 is for the transfer portal for us. So I think it just opens up an entire new world with the transfer portal, because really with us, I mean, landing a top recruit like Wiggins in 2014 and landing someone like Dickinson, the very top guy in the entire country in the transfer portal coming to play here, I think that's going to bode really well. Now, obviously, we need to see some in-season success for that to really, go well. It'd be like landing a top recruit and he gets no playing time sort of thing. So Hunter needs to have success here, which he definitely will. But I think it's huge for us going forward in terms of landing people from the transfer portal. And obviously my initial reactions were, if I was a betting man, I'd put a lot more money on us this season. I'm not going to, because that would be bad. But
well, you should have got him 3 days ago before he committed. They were 24-1 odds. Now they've dropped down to anywhere from 13 to 15-1.
Right. Well, and I agree with that. I think it takes us from Sweet 16, Elite 8 to Final Four at least. I mean, he is that much of an impactful player, and I am super excited because I think it completely changes how we're going to play offense. I think inside out game, you're going to see the most deadly inside out game you've ever seen from a Kansas team, because we have a guy that can absolutely kill you on the inside, and we have guys like Timberlake who can absolutely kill it from three. So I'm really excited because I think it's going to be a really dynamic offense, which is going to be cool. And we're going to get to see another dominant big guy here at Kansas, and that guy that can really, stretch out a lot farther than, guys like Doak and could, from the three and from the mid range. So super excited to see how we incorporate him in the offense.
Yeah, and we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, how Self's had his share of quality big men over the years, but he's never gotten the guy, like, the when I say the guy, the number one top big man in the market. We've always got guys that by year 2, 3, or 4, they develop into that. Azubuike, of course, had a tremendous senior year, but Bill
Yep.
Self's never had the guy from the get-go who is either the top, high school recruit coming in the country as a big man, or a transfer portal guy like Hunter. So I think this is a no-brainer question, but is Hunter Dickinson the most talented offensive big man Bill Self's ever acquired?
Oh man,
I
in terms of skill, yeah, I would say so.
Yep.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, a guy that can footwork, dynamic, mid range three. I mean, he can really stretch it out all 3 levels of offense on the court. So, I mean, is he going to be the best? That's obviously, we got to see how he plays. But from a skill perspective, I mean, you're going to be looking at a guy. I think a lot like Diedrich Lawson was. You're going to be seeing that kind of skill level. And we're going to have a roster that's actually built to succeed around them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think it's pretty close there offensively.
So obviously Hunter's the big ticket this week, but that is not the only thing that has happened in the KU basketball world this week. Kicked off last weekend actually with the signing of Arterio Morris out of Texas, the former 5-star, actually the number 1 ranked guard in his class from that
Yep.
season, freshman from Texas who transfers out, comes to KU. Now, obviously, everyone knows there's some of the off the court issues, and we're not going to get into that here. Don't think it is our position to talk about that. The only thing that we know is that the Big 12, KU Athletics, Bill Self, Travis Goff, all of them are very aware of the situation. They're monitoring it closely. I'm sure they'll do what's best needed. I'm not going to put any speculation into how that might impact his time here, but it sounds like it may not have as much of an impact. And again, don't want to get into how that looks off the court. Our focus here is going to be on the court. We hope that whatever issues he was having are no longer a concern. They get that figured out and he can learn from it, grow from it, become a better man, and focus on basketball. But we land Arterio Morris, who didn't do a whole lot at Texas this last year, just based on the amount of depth they had in the backcourt already. But a highly, highly ranked recruit, super talented athlete, very strong defensively in the backcourt. You're not asking him to come in and score 15, 20 a night, have 7, 8 assists a night. You're not asking him to shoot 45% from the 3, but you're asking him to come in and just play physical, speed, aggressive, 1 or 2 man spot in this lineup. What were your guys' thoughts on him actually choosing Kansas? Because at the time it was really going to be him or Primo Spears, but it felt like Kansas really wanted Morris. But what are your guys' thoughts on him joining the squad?
Yeah, there's definitely mixed emotions, I would say. It was, and again, we don't have to go into detail about the off the court stuff, but that is part of the reason why it was such mixed emotions for me. Because, half of KU Twitter loves it, and for good reason, because he's a tremendous talent, great defender, as we said. Now, I think he could develop really into point guard of the future type of guy. Or if he shows a lot of flashes of greatness, maybe he leaves for the draft at some point in a year or two. We don't know, but he's definitely capable of doing that. So it's exciting in that sense. Not so exciting about the off the court stuff. I was also a little disappointed because I think we talk about it all the time, so I don't have to beat a dead horse or anything. But we really, really need shooting. Every team does. We really need snipers from beyond the arc, and that's not what he is yet. He probably could develop into that, but we just don't know. It's kind of a question mark. I like. I think the one redeeming quality is, if we do play a lot of DeJuan and Arterio next to each other, it's that classic 2-point guard lineup that we've kind of come accustomed to. And we've played a lot of that over the last couple of seasons. And you think back to Frank Mason and Devontae Graham. Is this the next Frank Mason and Devontae Graham? It could be. So I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible.
I mean, it definitely gives us some Versatility. I mean, obviously, yeah. I mean, last year he's in the low 30s shooting wise and low 40s shooting in general from the field. So offensively, he's definitely got to polish some stuff off. But having two defensive minded guards, with him and DeJuan, I mean, if we're trying to stop an 8-0 run, or we're trying to, halt an offense from kind of taking off before the end of the half, I think it's an interesting lineup. I think the spacing is people are just going to load 5 in, and so it's going to be hard. Hunter will get doubled in the post, and it's going to be challenging on offense. But I do think it gives us some options if Self wants to play that rotation for like 5-ish minutes if we want to really get some stops in a row. So I'm excited about the versatility it adds. I'm also excited. This is the second year in a row we've got a Big 12 person from the transfer portal, which I think is actually really unique. And so I think that kind of shows. I mean, if there's a guy that we're going to tiptoe into tampering territory here at some point, because if we keep landing Big 12 guys from the transfer portal, Bill Self's going to be having longer conversations with them in the handshake lines after the game. So I think that's an interesting proponent. If there's ever a guy that, in the Big 12 that that enters the portal, I think all of a sudden they've gone to KU, they've played us, they've seen how Self coaches, they've seen the atmosphere. That kind of gives them a preview of what it could be like playing for us. So I think that's kind of an underrated aspect of us landing him. I do like the versatility. Obviously, there's concerns on offense, but I'll never say no to a talented guy coming to the roster.
I think basketball fit wise, I like the move. I think in the short term, I think I would have liked Primo Spears better for next year's team. But with Arterio, you're getting basically 3 more years of one of the highest ranked guards of his class. Like I said, insane athleticism. But basketball fit wise, I mean, he's a Bill Self kind of player. He's going to play hard. He's going to play defense. Bill even likes to take the guys that have some of the issues off the court things and try and, man them up, so to speak, and mentor them and turn them into better men. And we've had our fair share of guys that have had issues, and we've seen how a lot of them have developed in their time here with this coaching staff and actually move forward better from it. So I do like the fit there. I think it gives us a lot of versatility in the backcourt, like you said. I think KU instantly becomes one of the top 5, maybe top 3 defensive backcourts in the entire country. They can switch anything 1 through 3 with those 2 guys, and we'll see how the rest of the lineup shapes up. But I think those 2 specifically, there's a lot you can interchange. I think the shooting is the concern, but I don't think with the way this play style is going to be with Hunter this year that you're going to ask Arterio to be much of a shooter. I think you're really asking him to be a facilitator, maybe a good cutter, lane cutter, backdoor kind of guy, and use his athleticism on the offensive side more so than his scoring capabilities. But I love that move a lot, and I think it's gonna pan out well. The only negative thing I have to say about it, which we'll get into more here in a bit, is how it shakes out the rotation. But I do think that puts a little bit of a hampering on a guy like El Marco Jackson's potential, because now they're immediately fighting for the 2 spot and the backup point guard minute. So I think that does hurt him a little bit, which we'll get into more here in detail soon. But the other things that have gone on this week, obviously the downside of the transfer portal is the fact that guys leave the program. And of all the guys that have left so far this year, I think the 2 that we've seen transfer this week are ones that from a fan's perspective, it kind of hurt a little bit. Seeing a guy like Kyle Cuffe transfer now, I think that was one most people expected to happen because of roster flexibility. And if you're looking at the end of the day, nothing against Kyle Cuffe. We haven't seen him play a lot, so I don't want to speak to his game specifically. But on paper, we've upgraded at that backup guard spot with a guy whose potential and ceiling is probably much higher than Kyle. But you definitely feel for him. He's been here 2 years. He's been hurt both years. We've seen bits and pieces of him in practice and late night, and it kind of felt like he was going to have some serious competition, not just this last year for playing time, being here longer than some of the other guys, especially with the struggles the backcourt had. But he was going to be a guy, even though he might be at the end of the bench this year, he was going to fight for that backup 1 spot and backup 2 spot. So you feel for him leaving the program, and now he's got a decision to make to figure out where he wants to go. So we wish him best of luck there. And I'm sure, if you're a real KU fan, any of these guys that transfer out, unless you have some ill will towards them, you're typically following along with where they're going. So we'll hopefully do that. And then the other guy was Zuby. which also after Hunter's decision, it seemed pretty evident that one of him or Ernest Uday was gonna leave. JB and I were talking about this before we jumped on, how disappointing it is from a fan's perspective, because you're like, man, now we've got 3 higher quality bigs. We've got some versatility to do things with, but the minutes just weren't going to be there. I mean, we've talked about
Yeah.
this on other episodes. The way Bill Self does his rotations, his starters are going to average 30 plus minutes a night. So if you're starting 5 and Hunter Dickinson, who's probably one of the best 5 men in the entire nation, is going to average 32 to 35 minutes a game, you're talking about 5 to 10 minutes at most at the backup 5 spot. Well, if you have 2 guys that are, fighting for that time, they're fighting for scraps at that point. You're hoping, if you're both of them, that Hunter gets into foul trouble early or he has injury concerns, because that's the only way you're going to see the court. So I get the basketball side for both of them, that it'd be considered an option. Zuby probably has a little bit higher ceiling. He's got a little bit more offensive versatility right now than Uday does. He's got a little bit of a jumper, supposedly. We hear that that's happened in practice, just haven't seen it. So he announces, I guess at this point, he announces Friday, May 5th. I think I'll have this posted tomorrow on the 6th. So he announces he's leaving on Friday, May 5th. And unfortunately for him, what that means is he's got less than a week to find a new spot, as the transfer portal deadline, that window closes on the 11th of May. So he leaves the program. Again, it's probably going to be a playing time thing. We talked about this earlier, JB, but he's now got to wait 1, maybe 2 years, if Hunter stays 2 years, to get a chance of being a starter. And if you're a guy like Zuby, who, one, you want to play, yes, you want to be on a team that's competing for a championship, but do you want to compete for a championship sitting on the bench watching, or do you want to go out and actually play the game you love and have a chance to showcase what you're capable of? So I think it was a no-brainer that one of these two was going to go. For me, as a basketball fit, I actually like Uday's fit better on the team than Zuby. Uday just seems to be pretty solid in that pick and roll. He seems like the development path for him, was going to play out better over the course of 2-3 years, whereas Zuby's got a little bit higher ceiling in the short term, if that makes sense. So again, if we had to lose one of the two, I wanted to see it be Zuby more so than Uday. But again, it also sucks that you have to see a guy like Zuby leave. But what were your guys' thoughts on the two of them transferring out? How did you feel, not just as a fan, but how it sets up the rest of the team's roster moving forward?
It's bittersweet. It always is. I think, Kyle Cuffe, his ceiling, his realistic ceiling to me was kind of like a Joe Yesufu role from last year, which I don't think is a bad ceiling at all. I think he could have been that spark plug off the bench, which Joe was plenty of times over the course of last season. So what I think about Kyle also is, not only could he have been that spark plug, but he still has a lot of eligibility remaining. Didn't he apply for medical red shirt?
Yes.
So he's got 4 years, right? I believe. So
he might. It's 3 years for sure. He might get a fourth one. The kicker is because he's already got the COVID year too, so he might get 4 years still, but it could be 3.
Given that, I mean, the plus side to him transferring is, of course, he can really rewrite his story and find a great fit once he gets through his injuries and gets healthy. He was someone that was such an energy guy in the locker room. I hear so many good things about him being just a really stand-up kid, loving Kansas. His family adores the school. And I remember after last year, we were talking about the possibility of him transferring, and they were very adamant about, no, we're not going anywhere. We love Kansas. And for a Kansas guy in that sense, a real Kansas proud guy, him leaving the program is really sad. I think I can say the same exact things for Zuby. His family really loved Kansas, and I remember watching video packages after his commitment and just seeing the excitement in his face. Zuby, I think, provided a really good role last year. It was a small one, but he could have developed. So I'm looking at these guys, and it's a heartbreaker. But at the same time, as an adult, you really want to see the most out of them and see the best for them. And sometimes that's not at Kansas. We're getting into this unfortunate time where if you're not a really, really good guy or really, really good backup, you should just transfer. I mean, you touched on it. That rotation is going to get small. Kansas is not going to beat Bill Self in Kansas. They're not going to do the platoon swap 5-and-5 players. That's not us. It's 7 or 8 guys. It goes up to 9 or 10 when we're blowing out opponents, and that's it. I think they could have played a great role for us. It's just sad. We really could have had those guys be the future for us once the guys that are the it factor for us this year are gone. They really could have developed. So it was just bittersweet.
Yes, Spencer, let me ask you this question instead to kind of continue the transfer portal talk. This is probably the first, maybe the second year that the transfer portal madness is really taken off. Do you think that from a fan's perspective, this is going to kind of be the new norm or expectation that every year, I mean, we're talking KU's had now 7 guys transfer out. That's basically a full rotation. And, Bill Self was pretty adamant that and we saw it as fans all year that the bench offered us nothing this entire season. So clearly there was roster overhaul with a purpose. And again, you feel for these guys that are transferring out, but do you think this is going to kind of become the norm or the expectation that you're seeing a lot of roster turnover, kind of like you do in NBA free agency? And then follow up to that, how do you think that's going to impact, the recruiting stage for big schools like KU?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely going to be the new norm for title contenders, perennial title contenders. I mean, you won't see it at the mid majors, you won't see it at middle of the pack teams, but you will see it at places like KU, at places like Duke. I think KU is particularly susceptible to this because, like we've all mentioned, the way Self plays the roster. I mean, from a fan's perspective, at least from my perspective, and I totally agree with everything JB said. I mean, you root for these guys. I mean, especially like when Quentin Grimes left, I loved watching him at Houston and now playing for the Knicks and the playoffs. So, I mean, you feel for him and you continue to root for him afterwards. But to me, if it's a matter of you're kind of seeing college basketball teams almost go into win now mode, which is kind of weird because it's not a professional sports league.
Yeah.
But you're getting these guys that instead of taking these developmental projects like Zuby or Cuffe, guys that might take a year or two to kind of develop, they're taking guys like Timberlake. They're taking guys like Dickinson, these established stars that now get to enter this free agency like transfer portal. So you're going to see teams kind of prioritize that over it. Now, the big negative I could see from it is if I am a guy, if you're top recruit, somebody like Grady, you're going to come in, you're going to be the starter, you're going to get minutes, great. But if I'm a 3 or 4 star recruit, I'm like, okay, am I going to go to Kansas just to ride the bench the entire year and end up transferring to a mid-major conference? So
Exactly.
I see it could potentially hurt us with recruiting down the line. But I think the thing that will kind of offset it is that it seems like Bill Self's really good at this transfer portal thing. That's what I really like. So we might just find success through there instead of recruiting. So now you never know how this thing's going to get regulated. The NCAA might get tired of it and they might slap on some regulations to try to minimize the turnover because they know that is going to start becoming a very tricky thing in terms of legal loopholes and all that stuff. So it may not be good to rely on it if the NCAA is going to slap on a bunch of rules that kind of ruin it at some point. But I mean, we're not going to win the title in 22 if we don't get Remy Martin. So
Yeah.
if I have to choose between a guy that I really like as a great locker room guy, is going to be a great player for us at some point, and a guy that's going to come in and average 20 and 10 from a school, from the transfer portal, I'm going to take that. I think you got to be in win now mode. And, there's no salary caps or luxury taxes in college. So it really is something that can be repeated and sustained. But again, that's up until somebody, calls BS on the NCAA and they start changing things.
Yeah.
So
I think you kind of hit it on the head right there. That's kind of the direction I was wanting to take it is, the high school recruiting is probably going to take the biggest hit because now, and we'll get into this again here in a second, because now you look at KU's team, you've got 4 incoming freshmen. Well, now all four of them, in all honesty, are probably sitting anywhere between the bottom four spots in the rotation, maybe as high as the sixth man, seventh
Yep.
man. So what does that do for guys like that aren't your true, stud top 25 recruits? Does it negatively impact them? Does it change high school seniors, their decision process on where they go? Does it lead more of those guys going to the G League? Does it lead to more of them picking smaller schools? I do think it's gonna take a few years to kind of figure that out, but it definitely seems that Bill Self is having more success landing that type of guy in the portal than relying on the ceiling or the potential of that incoming
Right.
high school recruit. Which, and we know we've seen Bill Self for 20 years. It is very hard to be a freshman in a Bill Self system and
Yeah.
succeed and perform at a high level. Most of them just don't end up doing that. So I think that's where some of the negativity comes with the portal for sure. But like you said, Spencer, it is win now. And if we think about sports as a whole and how we consume sports and how it's entertaining for us, fans don't want to wait 3, 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
Some of us right now here in Kansas City, we're Royals fans, and it's 10, 20 years of development until we see a winning season. And fans are tired of that. Luckily for us, the Chiefs are the top dog every single year. We don't have to wait for wins. But fans want to see the winning now. They don't want to go, okay, this incoming freshman is going to be good as a senior. Well, he might not even be here 3 years from now. He might only be here for 1 year, so he's got to perform now.
Yeah.
So I do think that's the direction we're going to see it heading, and maybe between the NBA and the NCAA, they start working together more to figure out what's the best way to develop these athletes from high school and push them along so they can work in harmony as the three different levels. But for now, it definitely seems transfer portal is the way to go, and that's where all the talent is. So before we get into what's left for KU, there's obviously now 2 roster spots available to fill.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, it could be 1. It could honestly still be 3, depending on where they want to go with the scholarship numbers. So that leaves us with a couple of gaps in the roster still. And we've got a big name out there sitting in the transfer portal as well. So KU's got these 2 spots left. Let's talk first about Mackenzie Mbako, who had his visit yesterday and is visiting Indiana over the weekend. He's probably the next highest ranked guy that's left across the board. There's a couple other names we'll mention. He too seems one of those no-brainer perfect fits. That 3-4 man who's long, athletic, can actually shoot pretty decently for a younger prospect. Maybe doesn't have the speed of a true wing or the size of a true 4-man, but is that in between. Could do something similar to what maybe we were going to get with a guy like Harrison Ingram. What are your guys' thoughts on Mbako? If he was added to this team, what does that do for the lineup? How does that change things? Does it change anything at all? Just in general, how are we feeling?
Man, it's a big addition if we get him. It points us into this other stratosphere, pretty much of having. We are now. Don't get me wrong. We are arguably preseason number 1, number 2, definitely top 3 in just about every single person's ranking as it stands right now. With Mackenzie Mbako, getting him would, I think, propel us to number 1 without question. But then there's probably going to be a lot of people that are still looking at Duke. He was a former Duke commit, and he backed out because he wanted some playing time. And if Bill Self is in that room telling him, you're going to start for us, which we can talk about whether he'd start or not, it's looking like he's got a shot. He would, if he doesn't start, he would be 6th man. But he's someone that can absolutely fill Jalen's role when we don't even feel like we actually have to fill his role. What I really like about him is I'm confident that he has enough shooting prowess, he has enough shot creating prowess to take over a game if nothing's falling for Hunter, if nothing's falling for Nicholas Timberlake, if DeJuan is trying his hardest, but he can be that guy to take over. He can, we've seen games last season where Kevin McCullough had an insane point total, and that's kind of what I see from him as like the X factor, the secret weapon type of player. And like I said, it puts us into a whole nother level where I think every guy that's starting has a legit backup, and my gosh, it would be a huge win. We've got the roster space for it now. We had it before Zuby left. I didn't want Zuby to leave, but of course, now I'm kind of small tangent, but I feel like nothing in college basketball is a coincidence. Zuby leaving, it just feels like he's making room for us to get Mackenzie Mbako, and then but also save some scholarship space to reduce on our scholarships for our own self-imposed sanctions. So yeah, it would be a tremendous grab. He is he's a big body, and he's very, very talented. He's better than Harrison Ingram. He's right up there with some of the other recruits. So would be huge.
Yeah, I mean, I that definitely sums it all up. I mean, I really think the thing that would be exciting for me is the versatility it's going to offer. I mean, you get a guy that can play the fourth spot and can be an elite pick and pop guy that can move his feet, run the floor, big athlete. I mean, that's going to give us a lot. It's going to be a tough, hard conversation because we got KJ here starting. I mean, they're similar builds, very different skill sets. So I think at that point, it's going to be whether or not Bill wants to favor defense and he wants to get some defensive versatility. Does KJ have a 15-footer by the time next season starts? Or if he wants to go all in and have some really serious firepower in the starting lineup. I mean, KJ took the step this last season. I mean, he turned into a guy that, I mean, he could go out and get us some buckets when we really needed it, and he always brings the energy. So I would be very, very surprised. He's a Bill Self guy, like all the way through. I'd be very surprised if he lost a starting spot without losing it himself. So I definitely think he's going to be he'd be a coming off the bench kind of guy. And I think that's going to be good. That's going to give us, like last season we talked about, last season was when the bench came on, we didn't score. So you get a guy that's a versatile scorer that can really open things up for the rest of the guys coming off the bench. I think we have a really, really deep team if we get him. Now, the pitch to him is he's a very highly touted recruit. How do you pitch to him that says, hey, you're going to be, I mean, you can say, hey, you're going to be the focal point off our bench. If Bill can persuade him in the terms of minutes, not whether or not you start, you're going to get consistent playing time and you're going to be able to showcase all this stuff, then I think we have a shot of landing that. So that's my only thing here is if we get him, it's going to have to be, it's going to have to be an interesting conversation here because I don't think KJ leaves the starting lineup, but I'd be excited to get
No
him.
way.
I think it would make our bench just fantastic. So we'll just have to see what he's kind of looking for in terms of his freshman season.
Yeah, KJ's probably locked in at the 4. I mean,
I
unless
think so.
KJ goes to coach and was like, "Hey, I'll come off the bench if it means we get this guy because I know I'm going to be in there during clutch time." Like I think the way roster projections go in minutes, it's not always about who starts. It's about who plays the most minutes in the moments that matter the most and who finishes the games. So, I mean, KJ's going to be out there for every big moment. But if he's like, yeah, sure, let this guy play the first, 8-10 minutes of the first half or whatever. And then I do think there's a scenario where those two could play alongside each other with Hunter. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But JB, I didn't mean to cut you off there. You had a thought there you want to share.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say, he is trying to get the most minutes possible. I love what Spencer said about the minutes because he wants a big role. He wants to be the guy. That's the vibe that I get from him. I mean, he decommitted from Duke from a reason. We have to remember why people decommit. It's because, I guess my role isn't going to be what I was sold on before I committed to this school.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody could have predicted half of Duke's roster coming back or not even trying to go into the draft process and test the waters, right?
NIL,
feel
baby.
for the kid. Yeah, it's huge. I'm not gonna ever say like, oh, it's ruining college basketball. It's not, at least not yet. But Mackenzie, he wants to have a big role, and he absolutely can with the amount of talent that he has, and he can have that at Kansas. Now, whether he starts or not, we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, could you imagine him alongside KJ and Hunter? My gosh, we'd be huge. I mean, he's 6'8", gosh, 210 pounds. He's a big body, and he can, um, he's got a ton of talent, of course. So, would be really fun to see him in a Kansas uniform for sure.
So let's assume for a second that we do get news next week of Mbako choosing Kansas. Let's play a couple rotation setups. So obviously, in this scenario, I think it is 100% evident that KJ is locked in to the starting lineup, whether it's the 3 or the 4, it doesn't matter. I think they're interchangeable. So you got KJ, Dewan at the 1, Hunter at the 5. With the current roster we have and the addition of Mbako, if Mbako slides in, whether it's the 3 or the 4, and again, in all reality, I don't think it matters which one of him or KJ plays the 3 or the 4. It's all going to be about matchups and the way we run the offense. KJ doesn't shoot like a 3, but he can guard a 3. Mbako maybe shoots like a 3, but might line up better moving out of the high post. So in this scenario, would it make more sense to have Timberlake be your 2 guard and then have the first 2 guys off the bench being your Marco Jackson and Arterio Morris backcourt? So you still have insane speed, athleticism. You know, Arterio comes in and is your Dewan replacement as your strong defensive anchor. But then Marco's your energy, your firepower, your offense and the second unit. Or does Self go more defensive prowess? Because if you add, Arterio to that lineup, you don't have the same shooting, but you've got a pretty dang good 1 through 5 defensive unit. Now that's the unit that becomes your closing unit. But how do you think those minutes would shake out, assuming Mbako's on this roster?
Man,
Spencer, I'll let you go.
I think Timberlake's got to start. I think we got to have some sort of shooting on here because we got to divvy up the backcourt somehow here. And Dewan's going to start, obviously. So there's your defensive guy. You got to have Timberlake coming in and stretching that floor because unless Timberlake's a liability, unless he's a traffic cone on defense, I think we got to at least prioritize some offense here. I would love to have our Arterio be able to come in for Dewan, give him a breather, and fill in that role of distributor and defender, and then have Marco take on that Ejiofor role of being kind of a spark plug off the bench. Nick Timberlake's, I mean, what is he, a super senior? I mean, this dude definitely did not come here to be a spark plug off the bench. This dude came up here to be a bucket, to be a guy that can get his own shot, that can stretch the floor. So I like the idea of him and Dewan because I think that gives you that Grady and Dewan like backcourt. And then I like the idea of the 2 coming off here is pretty much, we got the energizer and then we got a stopper to come in and give Dewan a breather. So it gets a lot of versatility. And then, like we say, we got, Arterio coming in. If we bring, Mbako out there, as a stretch forward, that we don't lose a lot of offense and we keep some spacing there too. So I don't think we even have to sacrifice offense and defense at that point because we can get it either way. But I'm also just high on Timberlake because the idea of a shot creator that can shoot 40 plus from 3 is just fantastic to me.
Especially if he's opposite, same side as Hunter Dickinson when he's getting double teamed.
Oh my goodness, Hunter's, you can't double Hunter if you got a 45% guy from the wing. So, that's my, Self's going to do his thing and he's going to, probably test a couple of different things out. I think we're going to see, I don't think the starting lineup at the beginning of the year is going to be the same at the end. I think we're going to see some major experimentation here throughout the year, and Self's going to find a 5 that he's like, okay, that's it. We're going to go. And I think by the time we're deep into the conference play, at that point, we'll have the starting 5 online.
Yeah. And JB, before you give your thought, just because Spencer just mentioned this and it plays into this, I do think that maybe this is the first time, that Bill Self actually does the experimentation. Let's get these all. I mean, he would love to play Dewan 40 minutes a night. He would love to play Hunter 40 minutes a night. And come Big 12 play, they may play 37, 38 minutes a night. His guy usually does that. Jalen averaged, 37 plus. But these pieces, I think, give him the options to have more trust early on to where, okay, maybe Dewan plays 32 minutes a night and Arterio gets a little bit more run. So these guys are all ready come Big 12 play, postseason play, to where he doesn't have to rely. I think last year you had to have DeJuan on the court for 38 plus minutes
Yeah.
because one, the bench wasn't giving you any offense anyway, but Yesufu was a defensive liability compared to DeJuan. So DeJuan
Sure.
had to be out there. This year, maybe you can get by with, a little increase in talent level on the bench to where you don't have to run these guys as much as they do. Now, again, we know Bill Self's going to put the guys out there he trusts, and maybe this is all just talk right now. And that when we're sitting here a year from now, we're going, well, we were way wrong in the rotation. It was 7 guys like he always does. The rest of these guys didn't make the cut when it really mattered the most. But I think this does give him the options to spread things out, have a lot of trial and error, find different rhythms and units that make a lot of sense. Because it's not, I mean, JB and I talked about this off here. I do think the way this team is getting put together has a lot of feels of that 2020 team that didn't get the tournament run. JB was saying that earlier. Like, you mean, Udoka is basically Hunter in this case. You've got, Devon's a very different point guard than DeJuan Harris is, but you've got, that stud 1-2 combo there. Isaiah Moss would float into the corner that Azubuike was in, or Ochai or CB, but you've got a lot of the similarities. Arterio Morris, maybe he plays a similar role to what Marcus Garrett was on that team, just a good lockdown defender that you weren't asking to be doing a whole lot offensively. So it just feels like that's the direction this team is headed. And
that team was good.
The potential is going to be scary. But in JB, instead of giving me your thoughts on what Spencer was talking, let me ask you this instead.
Sure.
Does that though give you any concern factors for guys like Marcus Adams, Chris Johnson, Jamari McDowell, who right now, your guess would be probably your 9, 10, 11, 12 guy off the bench? Does that give you any concern for not only their development, but the potential that one of them puts their name in the portal this week? Because obviously somebody's going to be sitting next year.
Somebody, yeah, it's concerning. I think throughout this whole time, I've been looking at our incoming freshmen, and I'm thinking, Jamari McDowell's got a red shirt, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It's never a bad thing to redshirt and maintain your eligibility, in my opinion. Heck, Zuby could have done it for all I know this season if he ends up coming back. But just to maintain that eligibility. But Jamari McDowell, just based off of his ranking alone, I think would be the one that sits the most and likely red shirts. Even now, we've got a pretty stacked roster. I think we were expecting greatness this year, and when we're looking at these incoming freshmen, the best thing about it at this current moment with who we've put into the roster through transfer portal is we don't need any of them, with the exception of maybe Elmarco Jackson, to prove to be a valuable piece. Like we are set. And their role, their ideal role for me is almost like, okay, I see they're really great. I hope that they put in some valuable minutes in the minutes that they do get off the bench. And maybe, cross my fingers, if someone gets hurt, I want them to be ready. And I think they can. Marcus Adams, he's a big question mark. He's reclassifying, so we would not have originally had him. Is he going to be ready? I think he can be. I think he's a tremendous talent. So, I look at a guy like him. I think he's instantly the go-to guy if any of our bigs got hurt. But these guys are going to learn from our starters and from our main rotation players, and we're going to be set. I think I'm also excited for next year. And we're like the year after is what I mean. So, all good things. I really think we're set up for success. I have heard rumors, small rumors, but rumors nonetheless, that Chris Johnson might decommit. And my immediate thought to that was that would be a bummer. He's a great combo guard, good size, 6'5". He could be huge for us. And it's if he decommits, then it's a bummer, but I don't think it changes much of what we're looking at in the rotation.
Yeah, he's probably in that similar boat to Zuby of how much playing time am I comfortable with early on, and how quickly do I want to have the best opportunity? Because DeJuan's here for 2 more years, so you're not going to start over DeJuan. Marco's probably ahead of him right now, just off of the hype and potential. You know,
Yeah.
had things not gone the way they've gone in the portal this season, I think a lot of us thought El Marco had potential to be, that 2 guard spot that has an incredible year and goes pro early. But let's say he doesn't. So let's say El Marco comes back. So now you're competing again with El Marco for the 2 spot. Well, now you have Arterio Morris here. So unless Morris just has an insane year and goes on, you've got 3 guys competing for either the 2 spot, backup point guard minutes, plus who's ever in next year's class. How about the top guy in the class, Johnson, right now, who's on a visit to KU as we speak. So you've got all this competition. So I would not be shocked. I'm trying to have the perspective of, until we've seen these guys play, I don't have to be that loyal to them. I know that sounds kind of bad, but in reality, I want what's best for the team. So if Arterio Morris gives you the higher upside the next 2 years than a guy like Chris Johnson, who maybe has that potential, well, then I guess another way to phrase it is, if Johnson were to put in the portal, well, we haven't seen him do anything. We don't know anything really about him that yet. So what has KU lost to the average fan? Now, to those that, are deep into recruiting and scouting, we could sit here and talk, all right, here's why Chris Johnson's an excellent fit at Kansas. Here's how his career shapes out. But if we're in this win now mode frequently and every year, like KU's probably going to be, Bill Self made it pretty clear when he had that press conference. He goes, I'm not going anywhere, but we're kicking things up a notch, and I'm taking this program to a level we have never seen. So that to me does not say, all right, we're going to develop a core for 2-3 years, and every 4 years we're competing for a Final Four. No, he's saying, if we're not in the Final Four every year, I'm not doing my job. So again, I'm not as worried if a guy like that puts in, because I think especially this year specifically, I don't think Chris Johnson's impact is going to be tremendous. Now, maybe a year from now, again, I'm wrong, who knows? But I think that's the mindset I'm trying to have, is what's best for us to win this next season with the crew we have. So with a guy like Hunter now being the focal point, DeJuan being your star in the backcourt, who's going to average like 12 assists a game, hopefully, you go get a guy like Mbako to pair along with the rest of this crew. I am okay with the end of the bench being not the most talented, because again, how often does KU go more than 7, 8, 9 deep anyway? You're not counting on that 10th, 11th, 12th man to really provide much. Plus, we still got walk-ons like Jankovic at the end of the bench who can come in and spark us up for a few threes. But that's my kind of thoughts there. I don't know if you guys feel similar or any different on how that changes your mindset on incoming freshmen for the foreseeable future.
It's just scary, because I look at this and I'm thinking, for the year after next, there's no way that Chris Johnson starts. I mean, how would he start? He'd still be behind DeJuan, Arterio, assuming he stays. Nick will be gone. KJ
it's safe to assume, if they felt that high about Chris Johnson, Arterio's not here. And this is me speaking. I'm not speaking for Bill Self or anything, but just the writing on the wall suggests, if you go get a guy who's similar, then that either means you don't have enough trust in the guy you brought in, or you just think this guy's that much better. So if this guy's that much better, then let's just go with that guy.
I just kind of hope that he just remains patient and he waits to develop. It's okay to develop on the bench for 2 years. I don't know why they're transferring out after freshman year because they didn't get enough time. Everybody that's transferring wants to start.
They all want that immediate success. That's the generation and the society we live in now. Immediate success.
There's not 20 guys on the court at one time for a basketball game. It's 5-on-5, and only so many people can start. So it's just it's frustrating a little bit, but that's how college basketball is now, and I don't think it's terrible. I think in time we will get used to that formula where we're really heavily dependent on the transfer portal rather than the freshmen incoming from high school, because transfer portal has proven players in high schools more often than not. Just seems
it's
like
potential.
It's potential.
Spencer, what are your final thoughts on that?
Well, from the perspective of a guy coming in, Like these are guys that all throughout high school, they're the guy. They're averaging 25, 30 points. They're the guy that's got the ball in their hands. They can call ISOs if they want. They're that guy. So for them, they're coming in. We can talk at the end of the day, like people can want to go play in the NBA. They can want to go overseas. They want NIL money. These guys just want to hoop. They just want to play. And so it kind of, it's brutal, to go there and go from being a guy that you're playing the entire game, you're the focal point on offense, you're doing all these things to being the guy that is at the end of the bench. So it's tough, and I don't even think a lot of people are harping on it's like, oh, they got big egos, all this. I just think these guys want to play. I think it's just a love of the sport of basketball. So I definitely see how it can be challenging. If you're coming to what I will say, if you're going to come to Kansas as a freshman, take one charge, dive for one loose ball, and Self will play you 40 minutes a game. He'll keep you on the floor during timeouts.
Absolutely.
Like he like you see what Self wants. Like go out there and do the things that the coach is going to want you to do, and you're going to get playing time. I promise. Like you could be the most talented offensive. We saw it with Remy Martin, a guy that played 5 years in college. He came in, played a style that wasn't indicative of what how Kansas plays basketball. And, he was hurt and all this stuff, whatever you can say. But at the end of the day, it clashed with the style. And so you had a guy that's super offensively talented that can go out and get you a bucket, but he didn't do the things that Self wanted to do. And so if you're an incoming guy, just, figure out what your role is, piece that together, and you're going to get playing time. Like that stuff's going to come afterwards. So, and it's a challenge because there's probably other schools that are similar to Kansas, and we just don't know their internal culture. But man, it's tough. It's a different animal with KU because even some of the other blue bloods. I mean, Duke and Kentucky. Yeah, you're a freshman that averages 40. Cool, come in. You're starting and all that stuff. So, I don't know. It's just kind of tricky. I definitely feel for the guys coming in, the talented freshmen. So hopefully we get some guys that can develop and become those offensive powerhouses later in time. But we'll see.
Yep, I think you guys covered it all pretty well. Let's wrap up here because we're already way longer than I was hoping to be. Plenty of news this week, guys. There's still a lot coming. Jalen Tyson hasn't made a decision. It's probably not likely he comes to Kansas now because he wants to be that guy, but he's still out there. He hasn't committed anywhere yet. There's some other names. Grant Nelson just entered the portal, the freak big man from North Dakota State, who now with Hunter Dickinson here doesn't make any sense, but one could imagine a lineup with those two guys in there. Wouldn't happen, but
40% shooters 1 through 5.
But KU does have 2 spots.
If he came in, Ernest is gone, and I do not want that. So
yeah, I do want Ernest to stay long term. But KU does have 2 spots open. Kevin McCullough got an invite to the combine, so it's probably not likely he returns unless that just goes so poorly for him, or he just decides, hey, I'll make more money on an NIL deal than I will into the G League. So it's not likely he comes back, but they do have 2 spots left. We'll do another episode here in a couple days to kind of cover how to fill out the rest of the roster, mostly because I want to see if we get Mbako, and then we can talk about that final roster spot. But I will say this as we're closing, and you guys can pipe in too. It seems like one of those 2 spots is going to go to another big man, probably a guy that's content playing next to nothing a night, a guy that's similar to what Dwight Colby was for us a couple of years ago, or even a Hunter Mickelson. Got it right this time and said the right last name. A guy that's okay getting spot minutes here and there, maybe an upperclassman that's just looking to finish out his time, isn't looking to go pro, but just wants to be in a good culture. That's probably likely to happen. And I think that second scholarship is going to someone that's that 6'6" to 6'8" combo guard forward spot, someone like an Mbako or somebody similar. That's my prediction on how those 2 spots are going to go. But maybe they decide, we've got enough depth now that if they get a guy like Mbako, they just forego that other scholarship and push that down the line. Or maybe they bring back a guy like maybe they go back to someone like Kyle Cuffe and say, hey, we've got the roster spot now. If you're content doing what you've been doing, come back, or something like that. They've also got a couple there's a couple walk-on guys that they could essentially fill that role if they needed to. But that's kind of my thoughts there. Is there anything different you guys would say, or is that kind of what you line up with?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it like this is we're coming down to the final stretch. This has been a crazy off season. And as far as who's left in the portal, I did the numbers. There's, according to 24/7 Sports, who look at the transfer portal, 8 guys in the top 100 transfers available. Everybody else, all 92 others in the top 100, are committed somewhere. So there's not a lot left. Jalen Tyson is the only guy that we've been talking to in that list and that has shown serious interest and played a visit. So I think if I make any kind of prediction, I know that really wasn't the question, but if I make a prediction, I think Mackenzie Mbako commits to Kansas. I think Jalen Tyson goes to Cal, where he can be the guy. And then I wouldn't mind if we were just done at that point. We would have 11 scholarship players, I believe.
I think it'd be 12.
Would it be 12?
No, I think it'd be 11. It's hard to do the math now. It's been changed so much this week. You got your 4 incoming freshmen. You've got Hunter, Dewan, KJ, Timberlake,
Arterio.
So two spots. So 10 and 10, 11. Am I missing anybody?
I think that would be 11. If we got him.
So with Mbako would be 10.
Yeah.
And then 11 would be we've got to be missing somebody. I don't know. The math will all make it'll work out in the end run. But probably 1 or 2 spots.
Now, if we, so we're gonna have Dewan, Arterio, Nick, KJ.
Did I say
Hunter.
KJ? I think I forgot KJ.
And then our bench is likely Ernest, Elmarco, Marcus Adams, Chris Johnson, and then Jamari McDowell.
Yeah.
Now that's 10 right there. If we add Mbako
would be 11. Okay, so it'd be 12 would be the total they'd shoot for, or stay at 11.
But you know what? If we stay at 11, I mean, we just talked about how stacked we are. If we stay at 11 and limit those two, if we limit those 2 scholarships out, if we eliminate them, that's the end of our self-imposed sanction. So in the next year, the year after that, we can just not worry about it and have 13 guys and just ball out. So
and it could still be 3. We could still get a guy like Chris Johnson or Jamari McDowell decommit, or even a guy. I mean, I don't think it would, but even a guy like Elmarco Jackson could say, you know what, I want to go somewhere where I could be a starter right away. Guaranteed.
I hope not.
It could be 3, but likely
I want him to stay.
If you guys pay attention, I don't want to necessarily promote other things on this podcast necessarily because I want to grow ours, but go pay attention to Mike Vernon. He's always got the up-to-date scoop on what's going on, and he's probably the only one that is close enough to the situation to know for sure what's going to happen. But again, probably 1 or 2 guys. We'll know more here in about 5 days or so. Mbako's got his visit to Indiana over the weekend, and then I think he's got 1 more visit scheduled to Louisville next week. So who knows if he takes both. But let's kind of wrap it up there. We'll get on here in another couple days and see if Mbako's declared, and then talk about how we would fill those final spots. And of course, talk if there's any other movement, because again, there's 7 days left of the transfer portal before that window closes, and guys have to officially declare their intentions. Otherwise, once that portal window closes, if they prolong it down the road, then they have to sit out and miss that window. So we'll kind of finish up there, but this will be live here on all of our platforms, YouTube and Spotify, soon. Obviously, by the time you're hearing this, it is obviously uploaded. But if you can, guys, if you're following us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Once this posts and you get a chance to watch it, let us know your thoughts in the comment section on just the excitement level you have to see Hunter Dickinson in a KU jersey, and the offense that this KU team will have. Let us know how you're feeling about Bill Self as the top dog right now when it comes to the transfer portal recruiting. May not have the #1 recruiting class out of high school, but he's definitely putting together the best transfer list. But if you're listening on Spotify, you can also subscribe to us there and share with your friends. And again, you can find us over on Twitter at KCSA Pod and on Facebook at KC Sports Authority. We are also now on Instagram. I haven't talked a lot about it yet because I haven't put together a ton of content, but you can find us on Instagram as well at KCSA Pod. I'll start posting some of the shorts from some of these episodes on there, so you can kind of get a quick introduction to a couple of our episodes. Still a lot of fun when it comes to KU basketball down the road. We've got a couple guys I've been trying to line up with to do some fun joint episodes with some other groups, so stay tuned for all that. And again, the best way to stay up to date on all that is to follow us on all of our platforms. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, you will see all that pop up here on the screen. Again, if you're listening on Spotify, it'll be in the comment section below the episode recap on where to follow. So guys, thank you again for joining me tonight. As always, rock chalk, and looking forward to jumping on again soon.
Rock chalk.
Rock chalk.